Welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. I'm your pilot, Nolan Michaels. This is episode 20, and that's kind of exciting. The little itty bitty milestone that it is. I'm feeling a bit better. It's a bit of a sunny day here in Toronto. Hope you're all doing well. I think there's quite a bit to talk about, actually. Where should we start? How about this Boston Dynamics video that came out yesterday? I'm not going to play it here. I don't know how to deal with copyright and all that kind of issues in a podcast, but just go look up Boston Dynamics' newest video. Do you know that robot they have? It's called Spot the dog. It's like that four-legged creature with one arm that kind of also acts like a mouth. Well, they put a little top hat on it and gave it a voice. They attached GPT to the robot. So this dog can walk around and speak to you with different personalities. It can also hear you. Like, let's just, like, we are like 2.5 steps away from the Terminator. And why have we gotten that close? I'll never know. Literally, it's like the biggest human mystery, I think, is why we are going down this path. And this video they show is so surreal. And I just love seeing all the comments because people are just like laughing, like, oh, we're all gonna die. And it's like, yeah, probably. We're definitely building the thing that's gonna kill us. I don't know. I don't want to sound morbid, but oh man, that's what it looks like. The dog or the robot, maybe it's not a dog. It's much more of just a robot. They gave it like a butler personality, so it can talk to you in that sort of servant-esque kind of way. GPT's ability to play a role is so fun to use and so interesting and so dynamic. And it's a little disturbing how good it is at it. It's like the best actor ever that can play any role you give it. And all you have to do is write some text into the code, and the thing is able to be a butler. It's able to be a valley girl. It's able to be super sarcastic. The thing can do everything. And there's a couple key moments in the video that really bothered me, I would say. Okay, like one of them, let's just say that the first one is where the engineer guy says, I'm thirsty. Like, can you get me a drink? Or what can we do? Something along those lines. And the dog, or the robot, walks him over to the beverage section of the warehouse. I don't even know if I'm using the right words there. But he takes him to where a human can get a drink. And the robot says something like, here, grab a cup of water so you can energize yourself just like a robot does when it charges up at night. Something like that. And it's like, okay, it's kind of strange. It knows that, if a human is thirsty, it's going to want a drink. And then eventually it's probably going to be able to pour you the drink and hand it to you and all that stuff. Okay, and then the other thing that really bothered me, and the engineer in the video just kind of laughed it off as if it wasn't a big deal, but I feel like it will literally be the news clip headline in the disaster movie that is like the sign of the end of civilization. He talks about how the robot has emergent properties. It has emergent actions. And the engineer swiftly interrupts himself and says, it's not thinking. It doesn't know how to think. And then explains exactly what thinking is. So they asked the robot to show them their parents. They asked it like, who are your parents? And the thing walked over to one of the original robots that was made at Boston Dynamics, as if to say, this is where I came from. This is my lineage, my heritage. The robot's concept of a parent. And the engineer is like giggling, saying, we didn't tell it that. We didn't script it to know that. And I think he used the word like parallel thinking. Is that what he said? Sorry if I'm butchering this explanation, but the robot was able to do something it wasn't programmed to do. It was able to extrapolate information based on context and find an answer. And maybe I haven't mentioned that yet. They gave it a camera so that it can look at something. Well, it's always looking at something, but then it can describe what it's looking at so it knows what it sees and then can go from there. So yeah, this engineer had the had the stones to say to the camera, it's not thinking, it can't think, and then describe it actually thinking and doing something that they didn't tell it to do. And I'm just like, why are you beating around the bush? Why are you so hesitant to explain what is actually happening? I don't care if the science says it's not actually thinking. It just demonstrated the ability to think, to have a thought, to be asked a vague question and to find the most appropriate answer given the context of its surroundings. Maybe if you were in the middle of the desert and you asked it, show me your parents, maybe it wouldn't know what to do. But when you asked it in that warehouse, there was something there that satisfied the answer. I think that's a thought, and just sheer hubris of these people at Boston Dynamics to create this thing. It's so disappointing because you can tell that none of them have thought about the consequences. If you only think of the positives and only the good things, sure, those things might happen, but how many people there have campaigned against these kind of experiments? That's all I want to know. Like, I'd love to interview these people one by one and just like really wake them up. Like, what are you doing, man? Okay, so you thought about this idea. Did you ever think that maybe you shouldn't do it? I saw a really interesting comment in the Reddit thread for the video, and it said, I always wondered why managers of engineering departments usually didn't have an engineering degree. Then I came to the conclusion most engineers think, what can I do? While managers thought, what should you do? And then they say, seems like engineers are managing engineers these days. And I think that's just a very succinct way of explaining how you build the Terminator. Like, there's no way these people at Boston Dynamics have a good macro view of the world. It's just not, it's not coherent to their actions. They're literally building maneuverable robots. They're building things that can do what humans can do. And I know of all the good applications, I understand manual labor and all that won't have to be done anymore, and dangerous missions and excavations, and I get the good things, but why aren't the bad consequences ever brought up by these people? I know other people are mentioning it, but why aren't they? And I get it, they're a company, they have investors, you can't paint your company in a bad light, but you're on the front lines of this new world. Don't you have the responsibility to paint yourself in the bad light? Don't you have the responsibility to demonstrate you know what could go wrong? Like, why are you letting other people point out the flaws? I think people would be much more comfortable if they admitted all of the flaws and all of the potential problems that could happen. Then you would at least know that they're thinking about it. Even if they are thinking about it, we don't know that because they don't show that off. They just show their robots dancing. And it's like, yeah, okay, but what if those robots had knives or guns? Then what? Okay, so why the emergent property scares me so much. You ask the robot to get you a drink, or you tell the robot you're thirsty, so it goes and gets you a drink because it could link your symptom to a solution and it's able to provide that solution. What happens when it comes up with a solution that you did not want? Like, in an emergent way. Let's say there was no fridge or vending machine and you said you were thirsty. Would it get you toilet water? Would it dig into the ground because it knew that pipes plumbing was laid? And like, would it go after water? Like, at what point does it say to itself, no, that's not what they would want? And if it can ever say no to itself, isn't that thinking? Like, if it can come up with all the solutions to fix thirst and it checks them off as being unobtainable or less than desirable, isn't that a process of decision making? We don't think about digging up plumbing to get some water because that doesn't make any sense. A human wouldn't do that. It's not really possible for us to do that. But a robot could start digging into the ground. So if something is possible for them, when do they start to decide that it's not a good idea? And isn't that a thought? the concept of a thought to say no to oneself. And what if you said, just talking out loud in an earshot of one of these robots, that you're thinking about firing an employee, but you used language that is a bit colorful, like, hey, we got to get rid of that guy. He can't be here anymore. Something like that. What if an emergent property of the robot is to eliminate that person? Oh, my humans want this person gone. Let me get rid of him for you. Like, what I just said sounded so stupid. Why would that ever be a problem? Yet, in this very upbeat video with this happy music in the background, you have this nervous engineer on camera giggling about how this robot just performed some sort of emergent action. And the word emergent is important because it implies that you didn't know that path was there for them. You didn't set the path. They found that way of living. So how could you ever know that the robot wouldn't harm a human if it can do things that you didn't tell it to? What if you said you were hungry and it brought you some food, but what if it brought you a peanut butter granola bar and someone was allergic to peanuts? My point is, if it can do something without asking, how could you ever be sure that it wasn't going to do something you didn't want? And not just in a, oh no thank you, I'm allergic kind of way. What if it out-muscled you and it imposed its strength upon you? And you want to talk about breaking the will of a human, really not that hard to do. A stern puff of your chest and a strong no thank you will work. Have they practiced breaking the will of these robots? Something tells me that if you shook a robot's hand and you tried to be the bigger man, what if it just crushed your hand? Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? I don't think a robot has the same limitations as a human. So any human mask on a robot is just a very surface level visual. The robot isn't. Are we going to train these robots not to be super strong? Do you have to trick them and tell them that, like, oh, you can only lift 20 pounds so that it never tries to lift 200 pounds? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you have to nerf the confidence of these robots? I really don't know. And the other thing I want to point out, in the video, the person will talk and the robot will respond right away. But what you'll notice is there's always a camera cut between the question and the answer. And I think what that shows you is the response time between the robot and the person is a lot longer than you might think. And I don't even think it's that long. It's probably just a few seconds, but I bet those few seconds don't look good on camera. They really make it seem like, oh, you're talking to a machine that needs to hear you, processes an answer, voices an answer. It's not as simultaneous as it looks in the video. And I wonder why, again, why is someone like Boston Dynamics pulling tricks like that? Like, I'm sure it's a marketing department that they have that wants to show them in the best light. But if you have to lie through editing, lie through omission, what are you doing? Like, if a small robotics company did that, I'd understand. But when you're the biggest and the baddest, do you not have some sort of personal responsibility to show the truth and to, like, put everyone's mind at ease that, no, our robots can't actually respond right away? It's not instant. I don't know. It's so strange to see this lack of responsibility out of the first place person, the first place team. It's like, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a very important person. What I say shouldn't really matter to other people who are actually building things and changing the world. I get that. But if I had the opportunity to talk to these people, I think I would have no problem, like, scolding their lack of class. I really don't think I would. It's so, and maybe that sounds harsh. It's just so bizarre to see people treat magic with such low regard for how everybody else is going to interpret it. And in terms of building the Terminator, I think I was thinking about it like this. When all this robotic stuff started happening and AI automation started happening, maybe 10 years ago, I think it's the equivalent of building a highway in the desert. You can go as fast as you want on this highway. Go 500 miles an hour. There's nothing on either side of you. It's just dirt. It's just desert. There really is no danger. If you swerve off the road, it's basically just flat land, and then you can drive back onto the road. And you can keep going. Sure, driving fast is dangerous, but again, there's no like real big hazards near you. But as we're approaching this need for artificial general intelligence, that is more like trying to reach the top of a mountain. And to get to the top of a mountain, you'll have to drive in a circle around the mountain and eventually make it to the top. Now that has a lot of dangers, a lot of pitfalls. If you fall off that highway as you're driving in a circle, you're going to fall off the cliff. Well, there's a lot of potential for danger. And these companies haven't slowed down during these tight turns. In fact, they're speeding up. And that just, it blows my mind. Like, if you think of the Terminator as being the same as falling off of a cliff, now we're surrounded by open air. We're trying to get our way up the mountain. And if we fall off, there goes everything. We are a foot away from the Terminator. We are right beside it. And we just keep going. We're just going faster. Why are we building robots that can speak? That's all I want to know. What are we doing? Why are we getting closer and closer to the Terminator? What is the point? How many people have said no, we're not going to do that? And how did those people get overturned? That's all I want to know. Where are the people that are on the side of the humans? And how quickly were they dismissed as being like obstructive and oppressive to science and yada, yada, yada? Because in the same way, like, wasn't the church oppressive to science? And it seems like anyone who goes against progress is sort of the bad guy. But at some point, doesn't somebody have to play the role of the bad guy so that everybody else survives? I don't know. I'm sitting in a room by myself. Obviously, what I'm saying doesn't really matter. I don't know anything. I'm not out there and, at these places that are creating these things. I don't know what I'm talking about. All I can say is that upon seeing everything that these people are building, it's really uncomfortable. And then sure, maybe we can talk about those meta avatars that Mr. Zuckerberg is making. Mr. Zuckerberg. That's a tough name to have with a Mr. Like, can you call him Mr. Zuck? He probably wouldn't like that. Maybe Mr. Z would be pretty cool. You could probably convince him that that's like, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. What do you think Mark Zuckerberg's computer password is? Do you think it's just like a funny little phrase he says to himself, or is he completely random, lowercase, uppercase, number, symbols, and somehow he still remembers it? I don't know. But him and his people created those celebrity licensed avatars. I think maybe it was Kylie Jenner, maybe it was Kendall Jenner, don't really know, don't really care to be honest. And then maybe one was Snoop Dogg. Again, maybe I'm mixing up the celebrities that are actually got involved, but I think once celebrities see the success of the initial batch, I think everyone's going to sign up for it, because it's like, okay, I don't know how Meta is monetizing it, but maybe it's a subscription to something like Netflix where you can choose from a catalog of celebrities and you can just talk to them. They're just chatbots, but a lifelike looking chatbot. And maybe to the average person, it will seem out of this world, absolutely magical to be able to talk to Brad Pitt or Quentin Tarantino or Obi-Wan Kenobi, Ewan McGregor. And maybe it's just the ultimate mass consumer product where don't think about it too much, just consume, just have a little fun. I don't know how many people would really use it. It would really depend on how lonely you feel. But even then, do you want something as superficial as a celeb? Yeah, you know what? Maybe you do want a celebrity to talk to. Wouldn't that just lead to so many more problems of people thinking that they know these celebrities like Taylor Swift? And how quickly in talking to these celebrities do you realize that it's fake? How deep can they go? How neutered are they really? If you ask, put it this way, if you ask a celebrity about something you know a lot about, how much of a conversation can they actually hold with you? Can they just respond, or can they inquire into what you know as well? And where's all that data going? Um, Imagine the kind of data scraping you could get through a celebrity interviewer, a celebrity interrogator that would just casually say, like, hey, what have you been up to this weekend? Did you sell any drugs? Something like that. Like, how quickly people would put their guard down just because it's someone they've seen 1,000 times talking to them, but they don't realize it's a computer that's talking to them with the face of a familiar human. Again, I don't think I'll personally ever fall for that, but I'm not the target audience. They would be targeting teenagers and lonely adults. I don't want to use the word lonely as a disparaging term, but it's an accurate term, I think. If you're willing to talk to something that you know isn't real, like, we all understand that imaginary friends aren't congrusive to a, I'll put in quotations, normal life. And now these companies are expecting you to sign up and probably pay for imaginary friends. These things aren't real. They'll look a little more real or a lot more real, but don't you know that they're not? I feel like most people would know that they're not. And how much would you pay? Would you pay $100 to talk to Elon Musk, the GPT version of him? And how much of that money does Elon Musk want? Like 90% of it? Like, the only way that celebrities would have agreed to this is that the money is just outstanding. Probably a huge upfront fee for their likeness, and then probably a real good revenue share of whenever their model is used. And honestly, I think that's a good idea. That's how you have to merge with this technology rather than letting some random person in their bedroom configure all this stuff without your permission. I get it. But, when you see how quickly something like GPT gets nerfed because it said something a little inappropriate and then that gets picked up by the news station, what happens when one of these Medabots was a good TV show. I don't know if any of you ever watched that. So, like, a cartoon with a little robot that had a anger problem. Medabots, I think was his name. Okay, anyways, what happens when one of these Metabots says something wrong and it's a lifelike celebrity cursing out a culture or something like that? Like, what happens when one of them gets jailbroken? Oh, the headlines we're going to see are going to be so awkward and surreal. They're not going to make any sense. This technology is going so fast that when people mentally check in, let's say 4 times a year, every 3 months, into what the newest technology can do, the pace at which those 3 months go by are going to result in such different headlines that they're not even going to make sense to the majority of people. It's going to be something like, Kim Kardashian Medabot says yada yada yada, what a horrifying statement. And then people are going to read that and think Kim Kardashian said something, and then they're going to say, no, she didn't. It was this bot version of her. And they're going to say, wait, a bot? And then it's going to say Kim Kardashian, the real person, has come out and said they're going to sue Meta. And then the person's going to have to understand that Meta got licenses from these people and that you can just find them online. Like, I'll tell you this, I know the metaverse exists, but I still don't get it. I don't understand that people are buying property in the metaverse. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I guess I haven't looked enough into it, but my point is that these things progress so fast that if you check out just for a little bit, by the time the next wave of headlines roll out, they're not going to make any sense to you. Okay, and I'll just repeat what I just said for the perfect example. I knew the metaverse existed. I check out for a little bit, and a few months later, I hear that someone sold property for 200 grand. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense at all. What do you mean? When did you get the chance to start buying property? And how is there even property to buy? Because it's all digital. So can't everybody live in the same spot? And okay, if you buy a property, can you only interact with the people around you? I thought this was the digital world. Why are you confined to a place in the digital world? And if you want to move in the digital world, does it take time? Like, is property implies space. And space implies it will take time to get from point A to point B. How does that work in the digital world? If I went to a digital mall, do I have to walk around the mall digitally? Do you just think about where you want to go? I don't get it. And that's my point, is that a few months apart, you're just not going to understand what's happening. And I think I think that's only going to accelerate by the time deepfakes and by the time video rolls out, generative video, by the time you won't be able to tell reality from something that was created with a text prompt, people will have not been prepared for it. Dude, people are fighting inflation in the grocery store, rent prices, stagnant job wages. I'm telling you, Canada's not a very perky place to live at the moment for the past few years. People don't have time to keep up with technology when their brains are in survival mode. And it's not even like year to year, it's month to month, week to week. Every 2 weeks, you have to worry about, do you have enough money to pay your bills? And that kind of stress is not conducive to accepting new realities on top of that. And maybe that's one of the key reasons that I don't know if any of this stuff will ever really catch on. I think people have too much stuff to worry about in the real world to ever go live in a digital world. Like when you see something like Ready Player One, isn't the main characters like, don't they all live by themselves and they're just young people that live in like a trailer and their real life sucks, so they go live in the digital world? You don't really see any portrayals of like families partaking in those augmented reality or virtual reality experiences. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, just the portrayals are very individualistic. How could you ever raise a family worrying about your kid going to school, coming home from school, making sure they're fed, then getting them off to soccer practice? When do you have time to go hang out with Snoop Dogg? You know? So maybe that's not the target audience. Maybe it's people who have nothing else to do. I really don't know. Ooh, this is an interesting thought. If you got a job offer, but you had to work in the digital world, you had to go live in the metaverse, you had to work in the metaverse for the job, would you take it? That's kind of interesting. I bet that'll happen sometime. Like metaverse designers or something, like an interior designer who only decorates digital spaces. That could be pretty cool. And I wonder about, digital properties. Like, is there a cost associated with these digital assets in the same way that a real world has costs to different styles of couches and stuff? Like, if you wanted to redecorate your metaverse house, is it free to do? Can you choose whatever couch and whatever bed you want? Or does the king size bed cost a certain amount of electricity, so to speak, and you haven't saved enough yet or something like that? Like, are people going to be poor in the digital world? That's what I want to know. So I'm sure you know my thoughts about virtual reality and how I'm not the biggest fan of headsets, but augmented reality has always seemed to be really cool to me. And MKBHD did a video recently about this new headset that has such a clear pass through that you basically can, you put on the headset and you can see your room, and then things are augmented into it. Like a screen will appear in front of you and that screen stays there. You could walk around it, you could press buttons on it. You don't get the haptic feedback, but it's all there. And I think there are so many applications to that. If they could get that on your head in a non-intrusive way, like, I don't even want to wear glasses, so I don't really know how they would ever do this. But like, if you could play a board game with your friends that aren't in the same room, aren't in the same house, that would be amazing. Like if I'm doing laundry and in my little glasses headset, I hear my friends say, "Hey, it's your turn." And then I could walk over to my table, living room table or whatever, coffee table, and I could see the board that everyone's interacting with. And let's say it's a game of Risk. What if you could roll some digital dice and then you could see these little playing pieces animate and fight each other to visually spice up what you're seeing is happening? Maybe you don't even tell each other the dice that each other got. Maybe I roll a 6 and you roll a 5, so you think you might win and I'm pretty sure I'm going to win. And then we see our little men fight it out. It's like a little show they put on for you. I think that could be so exciting. And then when it's not your turn, you can go do whatever you need to do, get some food out of the fridge, and then you come back and you look at the table, and there's no mess to clean up. Everybody's in their own room, and we're able to play a board game. I think that'd be amazing. Also, I had this idea like a full 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago. I wish there was a way for people to play instruments that weren't there. Everybody's played the air guitar, but what if wearing these glasses, you could like look down at your hands and a guitar would appear and it would stay in the same spot. And then you were able to put your hands on the strings and strum away and have the guitar be played in that way. And you could just learn how to play guitar and practice playing guitar, just having fun by yourself, but in space, and it would know what you were doing. Same thing with a piano. What if you could just start playing the piano? You see it in front of you. The feedback would be pretty tough, so maybe you put something over your lap, something in the shape of a piano. Maybe it's just on your counter or on your desk. What if any surface could be turned into a piano? Practice anywhere kind of thing. That'd be pretty cool. That is something I've like had visions of a lot of years ago, and I could see myself like absolutely wanting to use that if that ever becomes a reality, which it seems like it will. Like, why wouldn't it be? It just has to become an idea by one of these people who are making these things. I think that'd be a lot of fun to use. And then have you heard about this thing called Nightshade? It's a way for artists to infect their art. It's something about infecting the pixels of their art so that when an AI scrapes the picture and tries to learn from it or inject it into its data, it like poisons the data set and corrupts it. Obviously, I'm not technical enough to really understand what that means or how that's possible, but I think that's so funny that an artist would go to that length to protect their art. Like, theoretically, you could just take a screenshot of the picture and use that as the data and then upscale it on your own. Like, you know, there are ways around it, but it's really wild that, first of all, there's a market for it, that people are so against AI, they're trying to poison it. And maybe it's just the language that's being used is a little off-putting. Like, oh, you're trying to hurt the AI because it's trying to learn from you and you're going to poison the data. Maybe that's just the best way of explaining what's really happening. But the fact that some group of people found a way to poison the data, one thing, and then marketed that to artists, probably through some DMs like, hey, if you use our product, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that if your art ever gets stolen, you might really hurt the AI. I don't know. How would you feel about that? Would you ever willingly, knowingly hurt progress that way? And it just seems odd, and maybe it's just the language being used, because I understand why artists wouldn't want that happening to them. So I don't blame them for doing it. It's just like it's a very weird headline to read. The new tool allowing artists to poison AI models with corrupted training data. Like, it's so odd. Anyways, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure there will always be something to talk about. Thank you for joining me on 20 podcasts so far. I think that's fun. I think that's exciting. Here's to another 20 more, another half a year, roughly. I hope you're doing well. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Peace.